Welcome back to the Observatory, everybody. Today we're talking with Adi Polak. She's the VP of devex at Treeverse. Treeverse is a company behind the free open source software called lakeFS, and lakeFS enables, let me make sure I get this right, atomic versioned data lake on top of an object store. So for several years before that, she's worked on cloud scale analytics back at Microsoft and is a software engineer by background. She's also the author of the book called Scaling Machine Learning with Spark, Distributed ML with MLlib, TensorFlow, and PyTorch. Adi, welcome to the Observatory.
Thank you so much, Kyle. I'm super excited to be with you here today.
Awesome. Well, maybe we could start. Tell us a little bit about lakeFS. I've heard about it. I've seen a couple of the blog posts from lakeFS. I talk to a lot of folks that are trying to work with data that's in object stores and want some sort of an interface to it. Tell us a little bit more about lakeFS and maybe how it's different from some other object store interfaces that people might be familiar with already.
Yeah, of course. So when we think about object stores, we of course talk about the cloud. There may be some MinIO, something related to HDFS, although it's not exactly an object store. And then usually we hit a couple of problems. We hit often the problems of cost. It's very high cost. The cost grows as we use more of that. And then we hit a couple of other problems like reproducibility. Sometimes we need to reprocess some of our logic with a specific version of the data. We also hit the problems of not being able to revert because essentially the data in object stores, and if we look at S3 or Azure Blob, is mutable. And mutable means we can change it, we can delete it, we can do what we want with it. And then it's usually when sometimes machines or humans makes mistakes and delete critical production data that problem starts often. And lakeFS comes to solve that problem. lakeFS enables us to treat our data lake the same way we treat our code with Git-like interface, where we can actually create our own repositories of data sets. In each repository, we can have multiple data sets that we work on and collaborate on, which creates our end result, which is the data product that we either expose downstream to the next system or expose to our customers. And because it uses the Git-like concepts, we call it, we have the capability to branch out of a mainstream of data, work on a specific branch, introduce some feature, do some testing, and then decide what we want to do with this data. And it also enables us the best practices from software development of CI/CD, which actually means in data that we can, again, branch out of the mainstream of data, run the different logics or analytics or any processing we want on top of the data, and then create what we call quality gates. So leveraging mechanism that enables us to create quality gates before we're actually automatically merging it back to the mainstream. So essentially it solves a lot of problems for a lot of data lake user. And the fun thing about it, it's open source. Everyone can go and take a look under the hood and see how it's built, how the model is built, all the different capabilities, try it out. We're a big believer in open source and giving back to the community.
Very cool. So if I'm getting that right, as like a data engineer, as a data scientist, like the superpower that this seems, if I understand correctly, that it would give me is the ability to treat ETL development, basically like check out a version of the data set and mess with it to work on ETL development or something like that, and see that as if it was physical data stored in the lake, and work with it privately before deciding whether or not I want to actually overwrite the original version of that when I'm done. Is that when I do finish that, is that going to, you talked about mutability or immutability. Once I'm done and I sort of like merge that data back into main or whatever that main branch is that going to like overwrite and replace that data at some point?
Yeah, after you run all your checks, you're happy with the result, you want to overwrite it, you can. Which also, after you did do that, you can also revert back to an older commit. So you can actually travel back in time to a specific commit of the whole data lake, not only a specific table, but across the different tables or data sets that you keep there. Yeah, so 100%. And you nailed it. It's a data versioning under the hood. It's a data versioning engine that enables us with relatively zero copy abilities to copy our data into a new branch again, it's not a real copy. It's a shallow copy. We only have pointers to the actual data, and we do copy on write. So if we are changing some of the files and we're writing them back to storage, this is when the writing operation is going to take place. Which enables all this mechanism.
And do you find, is this most heavily used by data engineers, data scientists, mix of both? Like who is lakeFS for?
It's a great question. So we saw two dominant, maybe three dominant personas. And again, it's very high level. Like when you talk about data engineers, there's multiple persona within the data engineering world as of today. So it's very hard to drill down into like the very specifics. But we do see a lot of data engineers using it, specifically people that comes from Hadoop world. So a lot of heavy Spark user, Airflow, etc. We also see machine learning engineers that building the infrastructure for data scientists are leveraging lakeFS. And actually, one of the companies, they spoke about it publicly. We have Volvo, and it's a user of us for the last 2 years, if I remember correctly. And they created a whole wrapper for their machine learning platform that enables their data scientists to just create a notebook and already have inside it the branch for the specific repository and the data that they work with. So we see a lot of machine learning engineers leveraging that by creating wrapper around lakeFS to enable data scientists to do their work on a zero copy version of the data, which enables them to collaborate on the same data sets and also enable them to reproduce their experiments. What we learned, I didn't know that before, so it was an interesting journey. What we learned that the FDA is now they have regulations around machine learning that asks company to be able to reproduce their machine learning experiment, and for that they need the exact data set, the exact code, the exact environment. And for the code, we already solved it. For the environment, it's very easy. For the data was always tricky part because a lot of data scientists were doing different permutations of the data during their run, saving it to one place, to the other place. It wasn't well organized. And now they're using lakeFS to organize all their data in one repository and also leverage the branching out and the versioning mechanism to give the whole reproducibility, to cover the whole space of reproducibility. So we see all these different personas are using it with the goal to be able to work better with their data, be able to recover from issues, be able to troubleshoot if they need to. Some data engineers are using it and created an automation in production that essentially creates branches for every ETL at the specific time that the ETL itself runs. So if it runs every 30 minutes or every hour or every 5 minutes, basically there's an automation that creates the branch and then run the logic and then introduce the quality gate hooks in order to decide if we want to automatically merge it back to the mainstream that data engineers created. It was really, really beautiful to see that people are actually taking it as a tool that goes, across the data teams and help everyone work together and collaborate.
I remember a few years ago, there's this great blog post by the data engineering team at Intuit describing a pipeline gating technique that they termed circuit breakers. And what you just described about quality gates sounds very similar to circuit breakers, where you can block the pipeline from sort of completing or promoting the data to production if it doesn't meet certain criteria. But this takes that even further because you can actually roll something back. Like even if you didn't implement the quality gate, you still have that. You can basically time travel back to that previous version before that instance of the ETL job ran. Is that correct?
100%. That's a really interesting article. I'd love to read it. I mean, I always enjoy reading about more concept and best practices that the industry creates. I feel strongly about it, and I feel like a lot of fantastic engineers created different best practices in the data world, and slowly now the industry finally realized that and kind of trying to figure out what would be the right way to go. And it's always fascinating to see how different companies call things in a different way also, and double down on different areas, probably according to the requirements and their needs, of course.
I know we're seeing like a ton of crossover right now between concepts that exist and have been around in software engineering for a while and data. I just spoke with on another episode of the Observatory with Andrew Jones from Go Cardless about data contracts, which are they've been described kind of like as APIs. So this just feels like one more point in that direction for data engineering adopting practices from software. So super cool. Adi, I want to change gears a little bit. You're the VP of devex. Can you tell us more? It's developer experience? I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that. What is that? What do you do? How does that look for lakeFS? What types of people are you working with? Tell us more.
Yeah, so we are responsible for building the ecosystem around lakeFS and also working together with our community to understand the different use cases and what they need out of lakeFS. So it spins across multiple disciplines. I have some folks that comes from marketing. I have some folks that comes from engineering. I have some folks that have been doing devex or devrel, depends how you want to call it, for years. So it's definitely a combination of different personalities and different skills that people bring to the table, with the sole goal to enable engineers the best practices we wish we had before, doing all the education that they need, building the tools if they need any adapters or any wrappers or something related to that around that. We do that as well. Documentation, tutorials to help people get started and also level up. One of my favorite tutorial that we have is actually how do you level up your data lake? And it starts with the very basic of, I have a CSV file. Okay, that's great. Now maybe I need a Parquet file. Okay, that's great. Maybe I need table format file, and then we were looking at Delta, Hoodie, and Iceberg, and then how all the way to leveraging lakeFS together with the previous technologies in order to really build my data lake to the level where it's I have the right architecture that going to take me through the next 10 years with all production troubleshoot and everything that I need, essentially. So we're very much public facing. We're working a lot with the community to give our users what they need, and also try and anticipate, what's the future brings. So working collaboratively with other companies as well to support them and kind of think together what's the right path to go and how we can enable data practitioners better tools. So it's a combination of a lot of different worlds and expertise.
So then that's what it sounds like: software engineering, community building, technical writing, marketing. Like that's a lot. And you yourself come from software engineering background. Do you feel like is that the main entry point? Like if someone was interested in devex as somewhere to take their career, would software engineering be the natural starting place for that? Do you see people come into the role from other places? Or if someone's interested in devex, how would you advise them to get sort of into it?
That's a fantastic question. I wish I knew it a couple of years ago. I think I have a sense, but there's always smarter people than I am, more experienced. I can share what I saw and some of the people I met along the way. So I saw people that comes from marketing, people that came from theater, people that came from software engineering, people that came from product, people that came from solution architects, so the sales or customer success side of the company. So it's definitely a mix of backgrounds. What brings them all together is that they care about the people and they care about the community that they work with, and they want to serve them in a way that gives them, the best content, the best experience, the best tools for them to be successful, essentially. So I spoke with so many folks, and each one of them brought a unique approach and unique skills. And it's really, really interesting. I think if people want to go into the DevX world, I highly recommend trying to understand which technology they love, what they're excited for, which people they want to work with. Because at the end of the day, you have your team, and this is great, and you have the folks in your company, and that's amazing. Having said that, you're probably going to work with a lot of folks in the community much more often than the people in the company specifically, because this is an essential part of the work of the day to day. Like, where are people? What do they need? How can I serve them better? So this is one area to think about. And then the second one is you can go into different ways. You can go into the more advocacy part, public facing, creating tutorials. Then you need the more technical skills. And here it really depends on which product you're advocating for. If it's a data product, you should probably have some data related experience in that field. If it's a web development product, then you should probably have some experience in the web space, understanding how thing works and how to put together an architecture. If you're going for a community, then you need some more people skills on your plate to be able to work with people and help people get unblocked. Documentation, you need some holistic approach around product and the developer journey and how people move from one place to the other and what can help them to take the next step and where do they get stuck. So it requires some research as well, looking into the data to understand, because sometimes developers don't like to speak with people. It's like, just let me be in my corner. I'll read some Reddit. I'll follow up with a tutorial and I'll figure it out. So for a lot of folks that do documentation, they need to be able to look into the data to understand where people get stuck so they could build what they need in order to serve them better. So it's definitely a combination of skills and different areas that people come from. I think in the data specifically, most of the folks I've seen comes from a background in data. So they have some notion, they understand how data works. Either they were a DBA or they were a data engineer or data analyst or a machine learning engineer, some notion related to data that brings them in.
So it sounds like you can get into DevX from a variety of backgrounds. The thing that sounds like it's important is having a passion for helping people with the technology or with the subject matter that you're choosing to be an advocate for. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. Either the technology or the domain area, and of course, the need to, or the love for serving people and helping people.
That's a great reason. Well, Adi, it's time for rapid fire questions. I've got 3 for you. Are you ready?
Yes, absolutely. Bring them on.
Okay. All right. Number 1, you get to speak with one figure from history. They could still be living. This could be somebody who's dead in the past, but you get to have a conversation with one person. Who would it be?
Jeff Bezos.
Really? Okay. Interesting. Tell us a little more about that.
I was always fascinated with the way they build the culture, especially when they started early on as a startup, and how they kept it on throughout the years, and also how they survived. I think they were part of the .com bubble back in the day, so how they survived and how they went through it. I think it's really interesting to see how a company grows and survives a couple of crisis, I guess, economic crisis, as well as maintain a specific culture while growing. I think it's very, very interesting to learn.
Okay. All right. Great. Number 2, you could either be fluent in every language or you could be a master on every instrument. Which of these 2 superpowers would you choose?
That's a good one. I'll master piano.
Master piano. Oh, you can master everything. You could be a master of every instrument, but then you would not be able to speak every language. But you choose the instruments.
Every instrument. Yeah, piano. I love the piano in the orchestra. It's just, I don't know, it's like my relaxation time when I want to tune down and at the end of the day and kind of relax. So I'll listen to an opera without any people speaking or, without actual text, just, and piano is always one of my favorites. So, and I suck at it. So maybe if I have some more time, I can practice.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. All right. Last one. A common phrase. I mean, you mentioned, obviously being able to version control data helps with, oopsies that tend to happen when doing data engineering or working on pipelines. What is your most notable sort of oops moment when it comes to data engineering or data pipeline?
Wow. So it wasn't a couple of years ago, so when I worked in the building infrastructure for analytics, for big data analytics, back in the days, we called it big data. It wasn't data engineering, it was big data. And we were basically I was a software developer building the infrastructure and also building some of the logic in the pipelines. I remember we had issues with our indexing. Our indexing were off. It returns null values. It crashed the system. Again, production issue. So I needed to get into the production data. And actually, back in the days, it was you run some Hive query against the data, and then you download the files, look into the files, whatever going on, in order to understand where the problem is. So it's a needle in the haystack problem. And once I figure out the timestamp where it got wrong, then I wanted to delete them. I wanted to copy the right data back. So we had a high availability architecture where we actually have 3 clusters that all of them were main, but only one was actually the active one. So we have active, passive architecture that all of them run the same operation calculation. And I went into production. I found the place, and then I was sitting together with the architect and another software engineer, and we were looking at the query because it was essentially a SQL query, just delete a couple of things. And we used the wrong timestamp. We deleted, or I deleted almost half of my production data. So it was a big oopsie.
Oh, no.
And I remember shaking, going into my director office, and I was like, I did a mistake. I accidentally deleted half of production data, and immediately it reflects into our BI and analytics and what we expose customers. The good thing, we have the architecture of the high availability architectures. We can direct all the networking and the request to a different cluster. But it was a very, very weird, scary situation to be at. And I remember he looked at me and he's like, "You'll fix it. You'll have 2 weeks." I was like, "Okay, 2 weeks. Let's go." So I ran to the DevOps office. And they were like, "Yeah, of course, we're saving some copies of the data. We have some tracking." And this is when I realized that everything we had wasn't really working. So all our recovery system for a specific cluster didn't really work. So I had to come up together with an idea like how we can copy, or maybe if we wait enough. And basically I put together a plan with the architect, and we solved it at the end of the day. But it was a very big oopsie, and I learned so much from it about the production system, about failures, recovering for failures, about all the system we thought works but didn't. Everything the DevOps built and couldn't really recover the cluster situation and bring it back to what it was before. So essentially, troubleshooting a problem, knowing, hey, it's a good idea. We have another cluster that runs the exact computation, so we were safe. Having said that, we paid very high price in maintaining 2 duplicates of the cluster. So back in those days, it was very common. But it was a very, very big oopsie. And I believe today it will be an even bigger oopsie, because a lot of the customers and a lot of the infrastructure engineer that I speak with actually don't do that anymore, because it's considered super pricey and no one want to do it. When people move to the cloud, they don't really have multiple Hadoop environment that stores copies of their data and their whole compute, HDFS, their whole, to basically multiple cluster that runs the same compute over the same data. So yeah.
That's an intense oopsie. It sounds like you made it out okay, but yeah, that one sounds like a rough couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the person who used to be my director is now a VP. He's doing VP of R&D at Akamai, and every once in a while he texts me like, "Hi, how are you? Congratulations," and so thanks. So I guess it came out all right. um, yeah, but it was definitely intense, and I learned a lot from that experience. It's like it's okay to make mistakes as long as you can actually sit down and figure out how to recover from that.
It's I've heard the phrase you can pedal faster on a bicycle if you have a good brake. So sounds like that applied in this scenario.
100%.
All right. Well, Adi, it's been great having you on the show. Adi is the author of a book, which we will link to down below if you're interested in checking that out and learning more. We'll also link down in the description to lakeFS. Definitely check it out and read some of the awesome documentation that Adi's team produces. But Adi, it's been great having you on. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Kyle. It was super lovely to be here with you today, and thank you for the great questions and conversation.
All right. We'll see you all next time for another episode of The Observatory.